Greetings and salutations, young true believers. So today we are talking about H.L.A. Hart's Are There Any Natural Rights? And Hart, right out of the starting block, says, I shall advance the thesis that if there are any moral rights at all, it follows that there is at least one natural right, the equal right of all men. Again, ladies, I apologize. This article was written in 55, so, right? There is at least one natural right, the equal right of all men to be free. By saying that there is this right, I mean that in the absence of certain special conditions which are consistent with the right being an equal right, any adult human being capable of choice, one, has the right to forbearance, that is, no one can interfere, right, on the part of all others, from the use of coercion or restraint against him, say to hinder coercion or restraint, and two, is at liberty to do, that is, he is under no obligation to abstain from any action which is not one coercing or restraining or designed to injure other persons, right? Now, Hart recognizes that this is kind of meager. You're saying there's only one natural right, and that's the right to be free. And he says, yes, that is exactly what I'm asserting, right? Why is he asserting it? He says, one, this right is one which all people have if they are capable of choice. They have it qua being a Latin legal phrase that means by virtue of the fact that, right, they are people, and not only if they are members of some society or stand in some special relation to each other. And two, this right is not created or conferred by people's voluntary action. Other moral rights are. So, okay, the next question that obviously arises is what's the relationship between rights and morality generally? And here on page 282, Hart tells us, there is, of course, no simple identification to be made between moral and legal rights, but there is an intimate connection between the two, and this itself is one feature which distinguishes a moral right from other fundamental moral concepts. It is not merely that, as a matter of fact, people speak of their moral rights mainly when advocating their incorporation in a legal system, but that the concept of a right belongs to that branch of morality which is specifically concerned to determine when one person's freedom may be limited by another's, and so to determine what actions may appropriately be made the subject of coercive legal rules. So again, what's he stating here? He's stating that even apart from the framework of a political society, the framework of a nation state, right? This notion of rights still applies, right? Again, the only natural right that Hart recognizes is the right of all people to be free. And that, again, that's binding regardless of whether or not there are any nation states. All right. What about the rights of non-human animals, right? Well, Hart, as is typical of philosophers up until basically the 70s, right? He hem-haws on this one. So he's talking about the considerations that he's made to this point, and on 283 he tells us, these considerations should incline us not to extend to animals and babies whom it is wrong to ill-treat the notion of a right to proper treatment. For the moral situation can be simply and adequately described here by saying that it is wrong, or that we ought not to ill-treat them, or in the philosopher's generalized sense of duty, that we have a duty not to ill-treat them. Again, gang, I think that's weak. Certainly, if human beings have a right to be free meaning, again, as Hart has described it, as free from coercion, right, free from restraint, then it would seem to me that a non-human animal, again, within certain limits, right, if a non-human animal is threatening to kill a human, for example, right, those rights would be waived. But I don't see any reason why those rights would be denied to a non-human animal. All right, well, what else is going on in this article? So he talks about special rights, and special rights would encompass things like power of attorney, those rare instances where you grant or extend someone else a certain degree of authority over your life in a situation in which you can't exercise it. And this is somewhat apropos because obviously one of the hot topics that people are talking about now is Britney Spears' conservatorship, where after she had her mental breakdown, her father became the executor of her estate, and everything she does, even her reproductive choices, strangely enough, right, are completely under his control, and she's fighting to break that now, right? So this is odd, but again, this is something that our society allows for, right? But again, that's an instance in which you extend, you grant, I should say, right, someone else power to control your current situation, at least within certain parameters. right? All right. Now, what about general rights, right? In contrast to special rights, this is page 286. Hart tells us, in contrast to special rights which constitute a justification peculiar to the holder of the right for interfering with another's freedom, are general rights which are asserted defensively when some unjustified interference is anticipated or threatened, in order to point out that the interference is unjustified. I have a right to say what I think. I have a right to worship as I please, right? What's characteristic of such rights? One, to have them is to have a moral justification for determining how another shall act, right? That he shall not interfere. Two, the moral justification does not arise from the character of the particular action to the performance of which the claimant has a right. What justifies this claim is simply there being no special relation between him and those who are threatening to interfere to justify that interference, that there is a particular exemplification of the equal right to be free, right? All right. So again, it's odd to think that all rights, as have been traditionally conceived of in Western philosophy, stem from this one, again, the only natural right, as Hart claims, and that's the right to be free. All human beings to be free. But nevertheless, that's his assertion, right? And really quickly, I think, because Hart doesn't take pains to define what a right is. Let's talk about that very briefly. A right in the Western philosophical tradition is this notion that when I assert a claim against you, right, you are obligated to recognize the validity of my claim and act in certain ways. So if I say, I painted your house, and I say I have a right to be paid for the services that I rendered you, that means I'm asserting a claim that you have an obligation to me, and you, if you're a rational, moral person, you recognize that that claim is binding on you and you have to act in certain ways. That's what a right means in this context.